Hi guys, it's Thorn. And Oliver. So the video I wanted to make today was actually one that was requested. And I'm kind of pumped because it's not mean, okay, but I get a little bit petty, okay. I don't often make videos that are negative, but you know, just because I don't say stuff doesn't mean I don't think it. So these are what the question was what do you wish what do you wish was different about our community? And by the question he meant our community as in Wiccans, pagans, witches, devotional polytheists, just kind of this giant pagan umbrella. This is also partially related to a kind of mini interview I did with Matt Oren a few weeks ago, who asked millennial witches what they would like to see change in their communities. So this stuff has kind of been on my mind a little bit, and I've been reading a lot more pagan and Wiccan books in the last month or so, more than I usually do. Believe it or not, I don't actually read all that much about witchcraft anymore. But anyway, so this video is spawned partially out of a question that I got from a subscriber and also out of the article that Matt published with Patheos, and I will link that below, of course. So, without further ado, these are 4 things that I would change about our communities if I had the power. So thing number 1 is I really wish that we would all just agree to stop using the word faith. It makes me crazy. It's always made me crazy. It made me even crazier after I started actually studying religion formally. But here's the deal. So faith, when people use the word, what they usually mean is they're using it in place of religion or spirituality. It's kind of a gentle word. That soft, gentle sound just makes it more appealing or something. I don't know. But faith is actually a thing that you do in particular religious traditions, particularly certain kinds of Christianity, or, well, all Christianity that I can name. Faith is an actual action that you take. It's a thing that you do. It's a thing that you have. And it has to do specifically with the relationship that Christians have with Christ. And the thing that witches and pagans are doing is not faith. Like, it's... I mean, maybe it is, okay? Maybe if you're a devotional polytheist or whatever, like, you have faith and that's a word that applies to you, but it does not apply in Wicca. Like, I'm sorry, it just doesn't. And we shouldn't use the word faith interchangeably in the same way that we get really pissed off when people use the word cult interchangeably with religion. Like, that doesn't make sense. The word faith is just as much of a problem. I think we mostly need to just suck it up and get used to the word religion. Or pick something else, I don't know. But faith means something in particular religious communities and traditions, and we've just kind of absconded with it because we think it's neutral, and it's not neutral. It refers to an action where you're putting trust in particular Christ, okay? And that's just not a thing that I do. So I don't have faith. It's not what I do. It's not who I am. So yes, if I have to hear people talk about their Wiccan faith or their Wicca faith or whatever, like on the inside, just know that I'm screaming, even though I'm gonna just nod politely. Okay. The second thing, how do I phrase this one? This one is mostly for us polytheists, and I'm guilty of it too, okay? But the nicest way I can think to put this is that I wish we would kind of collectively put a check on our own bullshit. So particularly when it comes to stuff that we think the gods have told us or are indicating to us. I mean, you cannot go to a festival or a conference or anything without running into 10 people who all think that the Morrigan is telling them to do something dramatic, okay? Or like, I'm doing this thing because the god blah, 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 blah. Or like, I don't know, Artemis is telling me such and such. Or Isis came to tea last afternoon and we had a chat. Like, look, I'm not saying obviously I'm a polytheist. okay? Obviously, like, I think the gods are real. I think the gods can do whatever they damn well please, right? If Persephone wants to show up for high tea, then she can, okay? But I think sometimes we do this thing, particularly when we're new, where things are so enchanting and we're so bent on looking for signs and looking for the validation in what we believe in and what we're practicing, that we don't necessarily stop and go, hey, maybe it's really something else, okay? And I think it's worth, again, for those of us who are polytheists, it's worth taking a step back and going, hey, you know, 1,000 years ago when this culture was still alive, this god was worshipped by priests who spent their entire lives doing X, Y, and Z just to even maybe talk to this god. Maybe he doesn't care about my exercise routine, right? Or like, maybe the god didn't actually tell me such and such about my schoolwork because that's not important in the grand scheme of the god. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying that everybody's experiences are bullshit, but we have this attitude in our community that, well, if somebody says it happened, then it happened. And I just don't think that that's always real healthy. I don't feel like I have the hubris. Oh, actually, you know what? That word came to mind, but hubris, what hubris actually is, right, is this idea that you have some kind of authority, particularly from the gods, to do a thing. Like, there's this idea that you yourself are like a god, or you have knowledge and authority that you don't have. Hubris, okay? And hubris is exactly what we have and what we're expressing when we're convinced that we have some kind of personalized telephone to the gods. That's not to say that there aren't people in the world who do. Or, like, I don't know, and if you're one of those people, then great, okay? But everybody is claiming to be right now. We're kind of living in this climate where this is what's popular, and on the one hand, it's easy to say, maybe it's the case that, well, you know, these gods are kind of coming back to life and they've got more worshipers and more followers, so they're being more active. Maybe so, I don't know. I'm not a theologian and I'm not a devotee of most of these gods. But I think sometimes it would be worthwhile to just kind of chill out for a second and ask ourselves if maybe there could be another solution or another explanation for what we're experiencing. I think that's just, I think a level of skepticism is reasonable and healthy. So yeah. Last two things, and they're both related. So this is where my own personal, like, pettiness as an author is going to come out, okay? But even before then, honestly, it's the book snob in me who's offended. It's the reader and the book collector who's offended. I wish that we would stop supporting bad books just because they're popular and pretty. And you know, we can have lots of conversations about how, well, it's personal preference and everybody likes different things. And that stuff is true, but as somebody who studies English, who teaches English, and who has grown up being obsessed with books and analyzing books, some books are just not good. Some of them are poorly written. Some of them say things that are just factually incorrect. Some of them express things unclearly. Right, like, I don't know, I think we can do better. Especially today, there are so many books on the market, and you can't, when you go into a big box bookstore like a Barnes & Noble or a Books A Million or one of those places, or when you get on Amazon and you go through, like, their top sellers, these books have been selected for you based on sales algorithms and all kinds of other things, right? Like, best sellers are really chosen before they even hit the bookshop, just the way things are run, okay? Not everybody gets a fair shot as far as what ends up in a Barnes and Noble, okay, those things are selected before they're even printed. It's kind of like music, right? Like, music is recorded and manufactured and marketed in particular ways so that people already know what the hits are, okay? And it's why certain artists get preference where others don't. And the same thing is true for writers. And if you notice, the top books, I know, the top books on Amazon in like Wicca and witchcraft that have come out in the last few months, they're not by people in our communities. They're not by people who have the training and the knowledge and the expertise. They're not from people who, by and large, I respect. And they're not from people who show up at our events, who hang out in our spaces, who teach at our events. Like, they all have pretty hardcover copies. They're not coming out on witch and pagan publishers. And I've spent the last month reading some of them because you can't really talk shit about stuff until you read them, I think. And some of them are just objectively bad. A couple of them are actually rehashed from books that were printed in the 90s. I was reading one that's extremely popular right now, and I was like, why do I know this book? Oh, wait, it was published in the mid-90s. And it was kind of mediocre then, okay? So anyway, like, there's a lot out there. We need to be looking for better books. We need to support better authors. Yeah. Just because something has a whole lot of hits on Instagram doesn't mean that it's worth reading. And if it is worth reading, or maybe if you're curious, don't buy it, okay? Like, find yourself a used copy or borrow it from a friend, or I don't know, but the more money we throw at some of these things, the more we just make it okay for them to produce more. And that makes me really sad because it's pushing voices that are actually worthwhile out of the limelight. And last thing, and related to that last point, is that collectively as a community, and this particularly goes out to folks like me and some of the old timers, people who've been around for 10, 20, 30 years, we all need to collectively recommend better books. Because some of us have been recommending the same books since the mid-90s, and there's just better stuff out there. This is what I told Matt Oren in the article that I'll link below. Scott Cunningham's Wicca, A Guide for the Solitary Practitioner came out in 1990, I think. And the first chapter is about how Wicca is basically shamanism. And this is just objectively wrong. Like, in the 90s, this was kind of a revolutionary idea, and it had its place. But it's 2018, and we need to stop telling people that Wicca is shamanism. Like, we need to just stop doing that. So, there's better books. Like, you see, when it's not one of these, like, pretty hardback Instagram books, it's either a book that, it's either Scott Cunningham, or it's some other book that was printed in, like, the 80s. Okay, I'm thinking about like Buckland's Big Blue Book of Witchcraft. Some of these books were amazing at the time. Don't get me wrong. I will tell you all day long about how much I love Teen Witch. Okay, I love Silver Ravenwolf. I love Scott Cunningham. I love Ray Buckland. I love them. I will cherish them forever. There are better books today. There are better books. Okay, and yeah, like we need to stop recommending the book that tells you that Wicca and shamanism are the same thing in the first 4 pages. Like, can we please just collectively agree to do that? I think it would make everybody's lives a lot easier. So, anyway, this has been your negative, kind of ranty, petty video from Thorn and Oliver. Yes. And I know. We're gonna go. I know.